Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate giri yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Mahaprabhum. Hare Krishna. Thank you once again for joining. Happy Kartik. So we will resume from verse 14 in the 12th chapter of the 4th canto. So this chapter is talks about the return of Dhruv to the spiritual world, and it begins with the discussion between Dhruva and Kuber. So once Swayambhu Manu asks the Dhruva to stop killing the yakshas, then Dhruva obediently follows the instructions. And then Kuber, who's the master of the yakshas, is very pleased. He comes and he preaches to Dhruva, very similar to what Swayambhu Manu had said, that all the killing was essentially ordained by destiny. Neither Dhruva nor the yaksha who killed his brother were to blame. He advised Dhruva to take shelter of the personality of Godhead and offered to give Dhruva a benediction. And Dhruva asks for the benediction of continuing unbroken meditation on the Lord, which Kuber is very, very happy to give, and then he returns. So we were in that section which is talking about the rule of Dhruva. That Dhruva now continues to rule for 36,000 years, and he rules as a Raj Rishi. That he protects everybody. He protects the principle of dharma. From a personal aspect, he, while externally engaged in appearing what appears to be karmakand, which is pious enjoyment, performing penances to burn away the previous sinful reactions. Internally, he is performing bhakti, and externally, he is doing whatever he is doing in order to inspire the people in his kingdom, set a good example. So we'll continue from verse 14. Evam bahu swam khalam Mahatma Vichalendriya Trivargopayakyam Niktva Putrayada Nipashanam. The self-controlled great soul Dhruva Maharaj thus passed many, many years favorably executing three kinds of worldly activities, namely religiosity, economic development, and satisfaction of material desires. Thereafter, he handed over the charge of the royal throne to his son. So Srila Prabhupada makes two important points in the purport. So the first point that he makes is that these three purusharthas, dharam, arth, and kam, is being executed by Dhruva as a matter of duty. He is neither too attached nor is he too detached. He does not prematurely renounce the kingdom, understanding his responsibility to the people in the kingdom, nor does he linger on. As soon as he sees that there is somebody qualified to take on, then he immediately lets go of everything. Same example of Maharaj Uttanpad. That as soon as Maharaj Uttanpad saw that Dhruva was ready, he renounced the kingdom. So Prabhupada says that Dhruva Maharaj as a king had to keep up his status quo, or it would not have been possible to rule over people in general. He did it perfectly. And then as soon as he saw his sons were grown up, then he gave them the charge. Second point Prabhupada makes is about Dhruva's external indulgence. So despite what seems to be his external indulgence, internally Dhruva is fully detached. So Dhruva is exemplifying the point that Lord Krishna makes in Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, where he says that that as the ignorant perform the duties with attachment to results, the learned, they act in the same way but without attachment. And why? Only for the sake of leading people on the right path, so as not to disrupt the minds of the ignorant people. So essentially Dhruva did it as a matter of duty and to make sure that other people don't get bewildered. That Dhruva renounced prematurely and went away, others would say he is such a great personality, he did it, so we should also do it. Srila Prabhupada illustrates this principle of internal detachment by a more contemporary example of Raghunath Das Goswami. And he writes that even though he was a son of a very rich man and he had no interest in enjoying material happiness, but when he was given this responsibility, then he did it perfectly. And this was based on the instruction of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu had given him the instruction of how a woman who has a paramour executes her duties to her husband very, very scrupulously. But in her mind, she is always thinking about her paramour. So similarly, one whose mind is stolen by Krishna will continue to perform the material duties with responsibility, but with complete material detachment internally, and also continuing to develop their attachment to their Lord. Verse 15. Manyamanidham vishvam maya rachitam atmani avidya rachita swapna gandharvana garopamam. Shridhar Maharaj realized that this cosmic manifestation bewilders living entities like a dream or phantasmagoria, because it is a creation of the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord. So Dhruva always had this realization since he was perfected to begin with. But now, since the circumstances were favorable, he is able to act on that realization. So the internal realization that he has now been externalized for the people to observe. So one may think that Dhruva had this realization now because he's acting on it, but he was a pure devotee, so he always had this realization. And what was it? That the cause, which is the Lord, is present in the result, which is the material creation. Therefore, the two are non-different. So in this verse, the material world is described as Gandharva Nagar. So Gandharva Nagar, Srila Prabhupada translates as phantasmagoria. So the Gandharvas are famous for their ability to enjoy based on the power of illusion, whether it is illusion created through art or music or through mysticism. So the material world is similarly, it is created as something that one enjoys in a dream or in an illusion out of ignorance. Prabhupada says that in the deep forest, it sometimes appears that there are big palaces and nice cities. That is technically called Gandharva Nagar. Similarly, in dreams also, we create many false things out of imagination. A self-realized person or a devotee knows well that this material cosmic manifestation is a temporary illusory representation appearing to be truth. It's like a phantasmagoria. This is confirmed in Prabhupada says that a devotee gives it up because he develops a higher taste, which is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishva Nivartate, 259. Okay, verse 16. Atmastreyaptaya suhudrabalam rittakosham antapuram parivraha uvascharamyaha bhumandalam jaladi mekhalam akalya kalo pastram miti saprayayo vishalama. Thus Dhruva Maharaj at the end left his kingdom, which extended all over the earth and was bounded by the great oceans. He considered his body, his wives, his children, his friends, his army, his rich treasury, his very comfortable places, palaces, and his many enjoyable pleasure grounds to be creations of the illusory energy. Thus, in due course of time, he retired to the forest in the Himalayas known as Badrika Ashram. So, considering that all things would be affected by time, Dhruva, he renounces everything, whether it is his material possessions, whether it is his connection with his family, whether it is his fame or his power, he renounces everything and leaves for Badrika Ashram. And Srila Prabhupada says that the only reason that he's able to do it, or anybody can do it, is because of the power of devotion. Because a person by nature has strong attraction to material wealth. Even if he is able to renounce it, he has still attraction to family. Even if they are able to renounce that, they have still attraction to name and fame. So difficult to give up all these attachments. Prabhupada says that Srila Dhruva Maharaj, from the acts of Srila Dhruva Maharaj, we can understand that somehow or other, if one becomes Krishna conscious, it does not matter what his motivation is in the beginning, he will eventually realize the real truth by the grace of the Lord. So, even at the age of 5 years, Dhruva had reached this consciousness. But because the Lord had instructed him to rule for the next 36,000 years, he was ruling as a service to the instructions of the Lord. And of course, the instruction of the Lord was not only for the benefit of Dhruva, so that any remnants of desires to enjoy are basically met, any remnants of past sinful activities are also experienced. So purified by all this, Dhruva is now in a position to continue to follow the instructions of the Lord, which is now renounce everything. Prabhupada says that even if one completes only a minor percentage of devotional service and then falls down from his immature position, he is better than a person who fully engages in the fruitive activities of the material world. Why? Because the nature of devotional service is that it induces detachment. Everything else will induce attachment to something or the else, whether it is karma, gyan, or dhyan. But the nature of bhakti is that right from the beginning, it begins to induce detachment. Verse 17. Tasyam vishuddhkarna shivavar vighaya badvasanam jita marun manasartakshah stule dadar bhagavat pratirupayetad nyayam stad avayavahito vasarat samadho. In Badrika Ashram, Dhruva Maharaj's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way, his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the Archavigraha form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord, and thus meditating upon him, entered into complete trance. So, from this verse 17 till verse 35 is the description of Dhruva's final journey back to Godhead. So, in this verse, we see that Dhruva once again engages in the process of Astanga Yoga that he had accomplished as a child. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that this verse, it speaks about all the 8 stages of Astanga Yoga. So, first stage of Yama, the prohibitions, that is implied. If you remember, when Narad Muni was giving instructions to Dhruva, at that time also he didn't speak about Yama because he was a child at the time. He didn't have any bad habits to restrain from. And this verse also doesn't speak about Yama. Then it says Shivavar Vigaya, that he bathed regularly in the crystal clear water. This is Niyam. Then Bhatva Asanam. Then he fixed himself in a sitting posture. This is Asana. So we have Yam, Niyam and Asana. Then Jitamarun, that he controlled his breathing process. This is Pranayama. Then Manasa Harta. Now he withdraws his mind. So what is this? Pratyaha. Then Stule Dadar Pratirupe. That he started meditating on the universal form of the Lord. This is his dharana. Then Dhyayams Bhagavat. That he concentrated on the actual form of the Lord. This is Dhyan. And then finally, Samadho. That without interruption, he meditated, which is Samadhi. So, Srila Prabhupada, in the translation, Stula Pratirupe, Srila Prabhupada translates as Archa Vigraha. That Dhruva was meditating on the Archa Vigraha. Vishwanath Chakravarti translates Srila Pratirupe as the universal form of the Lord, or the gross form of the Lord. So as per Vishwanath Chakravarti, the meditation of Dhruva progressed from the universal form of the Lord to the personal form of the Lord, when he moved from dharana to dhyan. And of course, samadhi was on the personal form of the Lord. And as per Srila Prabhupada, Dhruva meditated first on the deity form of the Lord, and then he progressed to the actual form of the Lord, and then progressed to samadhi. So in this context, Srila Prabhupada comments that how Archa Vigraha Seva or actual deity worship is also at the same level as dharana. So devotees who are engaged in the personal deity worship, they can be considered to be Astang yogis who have reached the yoga rudha platform. Right? We say that the first 4 stages is the yoga rukshu, and then the 4 are yoga ruksha. And for a person who is practicing Astang yoga, it may take many, many lifetimes to reach the yoga rudha stage. But when a devotee sincerely engages in worshipping the deity form, it is considered to be like dharana, which is essentially the 6th stage of Astang yoga. Prabhupada says that he concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha, the worshipable deity of the Lord, which exactly represents the Supreme Lord. And thus, thinking constantly of the deity, he became absorbed in trance. Worship of Archa Vigraha is not idle worship. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engage in the temple in the service of the Lord as Archa Vigraha, a form made of sthula, material objects. That's what Prabhupada says, sthula pratirupa is the form of the Lord made of material objects. Vishnu Chakravarti says the material form of the Lord, which is essentially the Vishwarupa. Slightly different interpretation of the same words. So Prabhupada later on says that thus the devotee gets the benefit of achieving the ultimate goal, that is to say, becoming always absorbed in the Lord. Right. So this basically is now pointing to dhyan and samadhi. That when the devotee follows the regulative principles of the worship, and because there is no difference in the Archa Vigraha form and the original form of the Lord, by meditating on the deity, the devotee gets the advantage of being absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord. And this makes him the perfect yogi. Prabhupada quotes, he doesn't quote, but he paraphrases. He says that the incessant thought of the Lord as prescribed in Bhagavad Gita makes one the topmost yogi. So yogi nam api sarvesham bhakate 647. Okay, moving on, verse 18. Bhaktim harau bhagvati pravahan ajashram Ananda Baspa Kalaya Muhurardhyamana Vikliptyamano Hridaya Pulakachitango Natmanamasmara Ashaviti Muktalinga. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus, transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. Now, you'll notice that this verse does not follow from the previous verse. Because when a yogi is performing Astang yoga, then he's not going to experience all these emotions. These are the emotions of one who is at the stage of Prema Bhakti. So Vishwanath Chakravarti explains this by saying that Dhruva actually performed, just as Dhruva performed the ritualistic activities as a king to inspire those who are on the path of Karamkand. In order to inspire those who are on the path of Astang Yoga, he performed 2 or 3 days of Astang Yoga. So he performed it again as a matter of duty, not because he was looking at it as a way for perfection. But after having performed it, he gave it up. And the Ashtasattvic Vikar that is being described in this verse is mature stage of bhakti. So at this position, constitutionally, he was situated in the position of prema bhakti. But he performs karma and astan just in order to inspire others. Like because he's in Badrika Ashram, because it is the hermitage of yogis. So he was inspiring by example. And this also shows that bhakti is the mature stage of Astang Yoga. That after having performed Astang Yoga, he basically moves on to the stage of bhakti. So even if he was performing Astang Yoga to set an example for others, the fact that he moves from Astang Yoga to bhakti also demonstrates that bhakti is the more advanced and mature stage of bhakti. So Dhruva, even though situated in his body, being a Mahabhagavat or a first-class devotee, he was fully liberated from both the gross and subtle body. So Prabhupada explains this with an analogy that when a coconut becomes completely dry, then the pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp is no longer attached to the shell or its covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he completely disconnects from the two material coverings, the subtle and the gross. Another important word in this verse is mukta linga. So mukta means liberated and linga means settled body. So the analogy with coconut is very apt because it has two coverings. One is the outer shell and the other is the inner shell. And even though when the coconut is dry, it still looks like a coconut for all practical purposes. But internally, there is no connection between the pulp of the coconut and the shells. So even though Dhruva externally had a body, it seemed to be like anybody else, but because of his absorption in the Lord, internally, he was completely disconnected from both the gross and the subtle body. Verse 19. Sadadasha viman grayam nabaso vatarad dhruvaha vibhrajaya dasadasho rapta rakapatit igoditam. As soon as the symptoms of his liberation were manifested, he saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky, as if the brilliant full moon was coming down, illuminating all the 10 directions. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that there are 3 levels of acquired knowledge: direct, which is received from the authorities; transcendental knowledge, which is knowledge beyond the senses; and finally, spiritual knowledge. So when one surpasses the stage of acquiring knowledge by the descending process, he is immediately situated on the transcendental platform. Dhruva Maharaj, being liberated from his material concept of life, was situated in transcendental knowledge and could perceive the presence of a transcendental airplane, which was brilliant as the full moonlight. So this is a very interesting tattva that Srila Prabhupada talks about in the purport, because it seems to go against the generally understood information that we are given, that empirical knowledge is inferior to descending knowledge. Right? When we talk about the different kinds of knowledges, we say then there is empirical knowledge that is by the senses, and Prem Kishore Prabhu, you might want to mute yourself. So there is the empirical knowledge that's by the senses, there is the inductive knowledge that is by intelligence, and then there is descending knowledge that is by parampara. And if the source of the descending knowledge is perfect, then the knowledge is the most superior. Prabhupada here is now saying that he became free of, he surpassed the stage of acquiring knowledge by descending process. So how did he surpass it? By empirical knowledge. What is the empirical knowledge? That he is observing the descent of the airplane, which is empirical. Now, this is essentially the symptom of the perfection of bhakti. So while we are in the process of executing devotional service, while our senses are more material, or I would say mostly material, we have to rely on descending knowledge. But if that descending knowledge did not result in empirical knowledge, then even we as practicing devotees would reject the descending knowledge. So for example, descending knowledge is that by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you experience peace of mind, detachment, devotional attachment. Now, based on the descending knowledge, we chant. But then empirically, we have to experience the benefits of chanting. If we did not, then we would reject that knowledge. But because we do, because we develop an attachment to the holy name, because we do see glimpses of spiritual happiness when we are chanting, now that empirical knowledge is now basically sitting over and above the descending knowledge. And in this way, our experience between descending and empirical knowledge, in the initial stage, it feeds one another. And finally, when one is perfect as Dhruva Maharaj, then everything that is seen empirically is non-different from what the descending knowledge is, because he is situated in spiritual perfection. So it's not that he is rejecting it, saying that this is all wrong, but he is rejecting the need to depend on it, because he is now situated at the stage of perfection. So a very strong preaching point, and also a point of self-realization for us, that we ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly, are also experiencing this, obviously to a much lesser extent, but we are experiencing, which is why we are staying with it. So many devotees will share that difficult to enjoy food that is not prasad. It's not that they are perfected devotees, but empirically they have seen that difference. There's a difference between eating prasad and non-prasad. So the potency of prasadam, that is coming as instructions. One should always eat prasad. but then it is being substantiated and verified by empirical knowledge. In addition to this, Srila Prabhupada also makes, he gives 3 examples in the purport of making distinction between gross and subtle bodies. So he's essentially referring to the previous verse, Muktalinga, that gave up his subtle body. And here Dhruva gives up both his gross and subtle body. So Prabhupada gives one example that at the time of sleeping, the gross body remains inactive while the subtle body travels. So travels in the realm of dreams. So means they're different. Then second example he gives is that the mental condition of a small child is different from a youth, which is different from an older person. So the gross body is changing, but the subtle body remains the same. And the third is that at the time of death, the gross body stays back and the soul is carried by the subtle body. Okay. Let's move on to the next verse, verse 20. Tatranudeva paravarya chaturbhujao shamao kishora aruna bhujekshano sitavavastabhya gadam suvashashu kirita haran gada charu kundalam. Dhruva Maharaj saw 2 very beautiful associates of Lord Vishnu in the plain. They had 4 hands and a blackish body luster. They were very youthful and their eyes were just like reddish lotus flowers. They held clubs in their hands and they were dressed in very attractive garments with helmets and were decorated with necklaces, bracelets and earrings. So we see over here Dhruva's return to the spiritual world. So just to do a quick recap on Dhruva's journey, at least in this chapter, we see that in verses 10 to 14, we see that Dhruva is executing Karmakanda perfectly. In verse 16, we see the renunciation of Dhruva. Verse 17, we see his austerities in the performance of Astanga Yoga. Verse 18, we see that the maturity of bhakti and the symptoms of prema bhakti manifesting. In verse 19, we see that he becomes liberated by the maturity of bhakti and he is personally able to witness the celestial airplane from Vaikuntha. And in verse 20, he is now seeing the residence of the Vaikuntha Loka. So it is said that the airplane from the spiritual world, the residents of the spiritual world are constantly traveling over the material world. But they cannot be seen unless one is spiritually emancipated. Why are they traveling? They're traveling, looking out for people like Ajamil, for devotees that need protection, for guiding devotees. So they're constantly busy in the material world, but they cannot even be seen by the demigods, because only one who is spiritually perfected can see. So Dhruva at this point is able to witness both the airplane as well as the demigods, the Vaikuntha-vasis. Prabhupada says that the inhabitants of Vishnu Loka are of the same bodily feature as Lord Vishnu, as they hold the club, conch shell, lotus flower and disc. In this verse, it is distinctly stated that they had 4 hands and were very nicely dressed. The description of the body decoration corresponds exactly to that of Vishnu. So we know that the residents of Vaikuntha-vasi, they are many of them, not all of them, but most of them are Sarupya. they don't have the Shivats, the mark on the chest, and they don't have the Kastub jewel, but otherwise they look very similar to Lord Vishnu. Okay, so we'll do a couple of more verses and then we'll pause for any discussion. Vigyaya tava uttamagaya kinkara abhyuttita swadvaso vismarta kramaha nanam namani gೃಣನ್ madhudvishah parshad pradhana iti samhatanjali. Dhruva Maharaj said, seeing that these uncommon personalities, Dhruva Maharaj, seeing that these uncommon personalities were direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately stood up. But being puzzled in hastiness, he forgot how to receive them in the proper way. Therefore, he simply offered obeisances with folded hands and chanted and glorified the holy names of the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti, he notes that sadhavasa means that out of confusion, Dhruva forgot the proper sequence of worshipping. The associates of the Lord are at the same level as the Lord. So he forgot the proper sequence of worshipping by sweet words, then by offering achman, then washing the lotus feet, offering a seat, offering arti. So he forgot all that. And Vishnu Chakravarti, he only said Jai Narayan, Jai Gopal, Jai Govinda. So he simply chanted the holy name. This also means that chanting the holy name is the same. That it takes and actually supersedes ritualistic worship. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that if we get a guest in our house, we simply say, Jai Govinda and, don't give him anything to eat or drink or a place to sit. But it talks that, when out of ecstasy, when out of spontaneous emotion, when one is greeting another devotee by Hare Krishna or chanting the names of the Lord, fully satisfying, more satisfying than the ritualistic worship. So Prabhupada says that simply by sincerely chanting the holy name of the Lord, everything becomes perfect. A devotee, therefore, either in danger or in happiness, constantly chants the Hare Krishna mantra. When he's in danger, he's immediately relieved, and when he's in a position to see Lord Vishnu or his associates directly by chanting the Maha Mantra, he can please the Lord. This is the absolute nature of the Maha Mantra. Either in danger or in happiness, it can be chanted without limitation. Okay, next verse, 22, and then we'll pause. Tam Krishna Padavan Vist Chetisham Badanjalam Parashraya Namrakandram Sunandananda Upasratya Sasmitam Pratayochaha Pushkarana Basammato. Dhruva Maharaj was always absorbed in thinking of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. His heart was full with Krishna. When the two confidential servants of the Supreme Lord, who were Nand and Sunand, approached him, smiling happily, Dhruva stood with folded hands, bowing humbly. They then addressed him as possible. So this is the loving exchange between devotees. That just like Dhruva is happy to see the associates of the Lord, the associates of the Lord are ecstatic to see his devotees. So Nanda and Sunanda are not complaining that they have been spent all the way from the spiritual world just to chauffeur Dhruva. And as we know, Nanda and Sunan, they are very exalted associates of the Lord, personal associates, right next to Lord Vishnu. But they are smiling happily, very, very happily. So smitam. Sasmitam. Smitam means smilingly. And Dhruva, he is of course very happy to see the associates of the Lords. As Prabhupada in the purport, he mentions that the word Pushkar Nab Samato is significant. Krishna or Lord Vishnu is known for his lotus eyes, lotus navel, lotus feet, and lotus palms. Here he is called Pushkar Nab, which is the personality of Godhead who has a lotus navel. And Samato means two confidential or very obedient servants. The materialistic way of life differs from the spiritual way of life in that one is disobedience, one is disobedience and the other is obedience to the will of the Supreme Lord. All entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and they're supposed to be always agreeable to the order of the Supreme Person. That is perfect oneness. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if there are any comments or discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. No question, but I like this analogy of the coconut. It's the first time I've heard this.
I'm sorry, what?
I said it's the first time I've heard this, the analogy of the coconut.
The coconut.
How it gets dry and then it's separated from the that's whatever they call it. It's a wonderful. You don't see the detachment inside, but it is there.
And when I was reading it, I was so when I grew up in Delhi, there aren't coconuts, but I know when we went to some coastal areas and there are coconuts there. I remember in a market, people used to shake it and hear it to test for the freshness of the coconut. So initially, I should think that they're hearing the water, if there's water in the coconut. But reading this, I was thinking that they're also seeing if the inner, because if the inner part is detached, then it will make more sound. So they're also seeing if the coconut is dried up or not. So yeah, I also found it interesting. It's an empirical analogy that covers it very nicely, the situation.
Yeah, Prabhupada has a lot of analogy. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I echo with Sarang Prabhuji. I was also thinking about that analogy. This is so wonderful that I heard also first time. Prabhuji, one question. In the process of acquiring knowledge, like we studied the imperfections lied in the process of Pratyaksha Praman and Anuman. And for Sabda Praman, it comes up with a clause that it should be from a perfect source. So, and initially a practitioner should accept it only on faith, and then after trying out for some time, he need to wait, see the results.
Right. So that's the process we follow, right? We accept the instructions on faith, and then when we follow through, then our faith increases when the results that are promised are delivered. Right. So, like I gave the analogy of prasadam, that initially we accept it on faith that prasadam is satisfying, and then when we start honoring prasadam more and more, at the same time we increase our spiritual practices, then we empirically experience it also. So it's not that he should not say that there's a timetable. I need this instruction to become empirically manifested in 6 months' time, otherwise I'll reject it. It's not that mentality. But that's how the process works. That the instructions, that the promises in the instructions, like, Krishna says that when you act with detachment, then you will cease to feel happiness and distress. And then when you actually do that, you start acting with detachment, and then you will observe that now you are not so much bewildered by the outcome of the activity, good or bad, right? And then you say, okay, now I believe that what Krishna is saying is true, and the faith then grows. It's a process. It's not like a stage. It's not like at certain point the instruction becomes fully manifest and the person rejects the instruction. It's not like that. But it's a process that goes on and on. Maybe earlier on, one may notice it at one place. And at some place, the person acts with detachment, sees that is not affected. And then he says, okay, the person may still be acting with attachment at other places, but at one place, he may act with detachment and sees that he's not bewildered. And then he says, okay, now I can act at more places. So then the process builds upon itself and continues.
Yes, Prabhuji. It spreads in all areas of life. Yes,
Exactly.
yes, Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, like as a preaching principle, when we share with somebody, how a beginner can protect themselves from the pseudo, imperfect sources. Because we know that Bhagavad Gita and Krishna and the descending mercy, and what precautions one may need to take in order to protect himself from, because everybody claims that their process is perfect.
So, like Prabhupada says in the introduction, that the precaution is that the source should be perfect and the via media should be perfect. So when you are taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who's connected in parampara, who is properly situated, and the words are confirmed by sadhu and shastra, then you know that you're protected. There are so many people, as you're saying, who will say that Krishna says this, Krishna says that, right? So you'll think that this is the perfect source, Krishna is the perfect source, but then the via media is not perfect. So that's the other protection, that the via media also has to be properly situated.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So while we are on a break, I just wanted to also talk a little bit about scheduling for the next 2 weeks. I actually have a conflict on Mondays and Wednesdays for the next 2 weeks. So we have two options. One is that if we can prepone the class by 1 hour, instead of 8 p.m., if we meet at 7 p.m., then we can have the class. The other option is that we cancel the class for the next 2 weeks, and then we can resume after that at the regular time of 8 p.m. So just wanted to hear from the devotees what their preference would be.
I am okay, Prabhu, if we start for 1 hour earlier, because it's Kartik. It's good that we continue instead of missing this kata. It's better to continue. I don't know if everybody is okay with starting at 7, but because of Kartik, I think it's good we continue.
Okay. Prem Kishore Prabhu?
Yeah, I have two things. One, We need to ask Paramatma Prabhu and Nandagopal Prabhu, I think. Nandagopal Prabhu, he just...
For me, it's okay, Prabhu. For me, it's okay, 7 p.m. I don't have any problem.
Okay. So if everyone is okay, I'm glad if it is early, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Um,
Paramatma Prabhu?
and also Venugopal Prabhu, he is from India. And Gaurasundar Prabhu, he said it's okay.
Gaurasundar Prabhu confirmed. Venugopal Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhu. I'll try to join early. My schedules are not so predictable for now, but I'll try to join.
And one other thing.
Also keep in mind that the time will change next week. So 7 p.m. So for you, it will be the same time because the 7 p.m. will be 8 p.m. So for both Gaurasundar Prabhu and Venugopal Prabhu, the times will actually be the same.
Then it's fine.
In fact, the week after that is when time will move because we move back an hour this weekend.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So also wanted to take this opportunity since we have Vaishnav Sangha over here to join me in congratulating and blessing Venugopal Prabhu's newborn baby.
Oh.
So Prabhu had a son recently and born in the auspicious month of Kartik. And so Prabhu, on behalf of all the devotees, I wish him Krishna consciousness and many, many years of service to Srila Prabhupada.
Congratulations, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Congratulations, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Okay. Ravi Prabhu, are you okay with the time change?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. I think Gaurasundar Prabhu is not there. No, Gaurasundar Prabhu is there. I think Paramatma Prabhu is not there. Lalita Madhav has confirmed, right?
Yeah. Paramatma Prabhu, I think he is okay. That's what I heard.
Oh, there you are. Prabhu, are you okay with are you okay with for the next 2 weeks starting the class an hour early?
Asking me for the general class.
You're breaking up.
I'm repeating. Are you asking me or the general class?
So we were asking everybody, but I think you were disconnected at the time.
It'll be great. Always great if the class starts earlier for me, especially I think on the 7th. We will be an hour later. It means that your 8 o'clock will be our 9, so it'll be very good if it starts earlier.
Okay. So this is for 2 weeks, but if it works for everybody, we can actually change the time. But at least this I'm doing for 2 weeks. Prema Manjari, are you okay?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I'm okay if it is done early because it will be late for me. 9:30 is so. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, very good.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, one question I would like to ask you. I know maybe you have a meeting, something like that. And would it be not too much pressure on you to have something back to back? Now I'm asking you because if it's a lot of pressure for you to have something back to back, then we have to consider your schedule as well.
No, actually this works. This works out good for me. that if you start, especially with this COVID, there's no commute right now. So I get off to work and I'm home. So initially, it used to take me an hour and a half to get home. So many times I was home at 7 or so. At that time it used to be hectic. Now it's okay because I generally finish work. I have some time to take a break. So 7 p.m. is fine. So I think the two people that it might affect is Achyuta and Varshana, because Varshana is in
California.
West Coast and
West Coast,
Achyuta
yeah.
is Midwest. So Prem Kishore Prabhu, I think we will, since most of the devotees are okay with it, we will move to 7 p.m. at least for the next 2 weeks. But if you can inform Achyuta and Varshana also.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, like you are saying, and if it works for all devotees, even long term moving to 7 o'clock also is preferred, Prabhuji, because after class immediately having tough time sleeping, going to bed right away for me, and it gives me little leverage. So I'm
fine with it. Like I said, I'm perfectly fine with it. So maybe we'll say this 2 weeks is a test run. If it works out okay, then we'll switch to it that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So moving back to our discussion on verse 23, chapter 12, canto 4. Sunandananda uchatuhu bhoborajan subhadram te vacham no vihitah shinu yah panchavarsha-stapa bhavan devam atitrapat. Nanda and Sunanda, the two confidential associates of Lord Vishnu, said, "Dear God, dear King, let there be all good fortune unto you. Please attentively hear what we shall say. When you were only 5 years old, you underwent severe austerities, and you thereby greatly satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So after Dhruva has rendered some kind of welcome, now the associates of Lord Vishnu are greeting Dhruva. So they say Subhadram te. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that when they're saying Subhadram te, they're indicating that Dhruva will attain the spiritual world in his present body. Prabhupada says that what was possible for Dhruva Maharaj is possible for anyone. Any 5-year-old child can be trained and within a very short time in his life become successful by realization of Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, this training is lacking all over the world. It is necessary for the leaders of Krishna conscious movement to start educational institutions in different parts of the world to train children starting at the age of 5 years. Thus, such children will not become hippies or spoiled children of society. Rather, they will become devotees of the Lord. So, Srila Prabhupada was a strong proponent of the Gurukul system. Unfortunately, it went through difficult phases. But this is the reason that if children are trained well at a young age, then just like Dhruva Maharaj, he lived for 36,000 years, but he was perfected from a very young age. And because he was perfected at a young age, he got everything. He got material comforts, glory, fame, family. So anything that a materially invested person might aspire for, Dhruva Maharaj got all that. But he was able to do it in a mode of devotion and At the end of his life, he perfected his devotion. All because at the young age, he was able to take instructions from Narad Muni and get connected to the Lord. So Prabhupada is drawing the same simile, that the same parallel, that if children are trained at a young age and they become well situated in the Krishna consciousness, they will lead lives that are materially successful, also devotionally successful, and in the end they will reach perfection. In verse 24, Tasyakila jagat-dhatu avam devasya sarginaha pashadav iha samprapto neitam tva bhagavat padam. We are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the creator of the whole universe, who carries in his hand the bow named Sharanga. We have been specifically deputed to take you to the spiritual world. So the Lord's paraphernalia is unique to the Lord. So no one else holds the Saranga bow. Only the Lord holds the Saranga bow. So when the associates are describing the Lord perfectly, they give two attributes, that he is the creator of the whole universe and he carries the bow Saranga. Now, of course, the Lord has many other attributes. Like he holds the Padma, Shankha, Gada. He is the consort of Lakshmi Devi. He is not only the creator of the material world, he is also the creator of the spiritual world. He has many, many attributes. But as it is said that attributes that uniquely identify are sufficient. So in this case, because they are descending into the material world, they speak about Lord Vishnu in the connection of his being creating the material world and holding the bow, Sharanga. So it is said that the weapons that the Lord holds are in the material world a representation of his ability to punish the miscreants. And so like his mace is described as smeared with the blood of the demons. So it basically demonstrates his ability to suppress miscreants. Prabhupada in the purport says that in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that simply by knowing his transcendental pastimes, whether within this material or in the spiritual world, anyone who understands factually who he is, how he appears and how he acts can be immediately fit for transfer to the spiritual world. Right? This is Prabhupada quoting chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita, verse 9. Janmakam chame divyam yome vetita pata. Then he says that this principle stated in the Bhagavad Gita operated in the case of King Dhruva. Throughout his life, he tried to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by austerity and penances. Now the mature result was that Dhruva Maharaj became fit to be carried to the spiritual world, accompanied by the confidential associates of the Lord. Okay, next verse, 25. Sadurjayam Vishnupadam Jitam Tvaya Yatsuryo Prapya Vichakshate Param Atistata Chandra Divakaradayo Graharakshatara Paryanti Dakshinam. To achieve Vishnu Lok is very difficult, but by your austerity, you have conquered. Even the great rishis and demigods cannot achieve this position. Simply to see the supreme abode, the Vishnu planet, the sun and moon and all the planets, stars, lunar mansions and solar planets are circumambulating it. Now, please come. You are welcome to go there. So the associate, so Nand and Sunanda, they are giving a description of the future residence of Dhruva, which is non-different from Vishnu Loka. So this is a point that gets made later on, that at this point Dhruva is not going back to the spiritual world that is outside the realm of the material world. He is going to the region where Shodakshaya Vishnu resides. So within every material world, there is a portion of it that is considered to be an extension of the Vaikuntha, where there is the Svetadvip and Shodakshaya Vishnu. So Dhruva is going to that area. Even though it's in the material world, it is non-different from Vaikuntha. It's called Vaikuntha. And when the material world is destroyed, then the residents go back to Vaikuntha. Prabhupada at one point explains that you can consider it like he actually explains it in the context of temples, but the analogy fits here also. He said you can consider it to be like embassies. When a foreign country has an embassy in another country, so even though physically it is located in the other country, but that embassy is considered to be the belonging to the country that has it. So if India has an embassy in the US, even though it may be in Washington, DC, but while you're on that embassy, the rules and the laws of the government of India, they preside at that time. So if somebody has to enter it, like the police has to enter it, they have to take permission to enter it. It's like a foreign territory, foreign area. So similarly, the Vaikuntha in the material world is an embassy of the spiritual world, non-different from it. So the Vishnu Dutas also talk about the rarity of attaining Vishnu Loka. So they compare it with other things like, he says, cannot be done by the Saptarishis. So the Saptarishis are famous for their austerities and knowledge. And then he says, cannot be attained by the Devas. The Devas are famous for their piety, karma. So simply to see it, the planets circumambulate it. So they're talking about the position of Dhruva Loka, that it will be positioned so that everything will move around it. Prabhupada says that while the scientists and philosophers go to the moon but are disappointed in their attempts to stay there and live, the devotee makes an easy journey to other planets and ultimately goes back to Godhead. So Prabhupada had written a book called Easy Journey to Other Planets. And he's kind of referring to that. He uses the same title in the purport. And essentially, the book talks about the same thing, that if you have to go to another planet, then going by a rocket or something like that is impossible or difficult. But through the process of piety, one can go to the heavenly planets, and through the process of bhakti, one can actually go to the spiritual world. Verse 26. Anastitam te pitrubhi anayerapyangakarhichet Atesta jagatam vandhyam tad Vishnu paramam padam. Dear King Dhruva, neither your forefather nor anyone else before you ever achieved such a transcendental planet. The planet known as Vishnu Loka, where Lord Vishnu personally resides, is the highest of all. It is worshipable by the inhabitants of all other planets within the universe. Please come with us and live there eternally. So it says that neither your forefather nor anyone else before you has attained this transcendental planet. So they're confirming the benediction that the Lord had given in response to the initial desire of Dhruva, that when he went to the forest, he said, I want a place higher than my grandfather, grandfather, great-grandfather, nobody else, in fact, he says, has attained that. So now they're confirming it, that yes, that this is a place greater than that achieved by any of your forefathers. Now, one may ask a question over here, that if you look at the lineage of Dhruva, it is very exalted. There is Maharaj Uttanpad, there is Swayambhavu Manu, there is Lord Brahma. So does that statement mean that none of them will ever attain the spiritual world? Because if Dhruva is exceeding their attainment. So not really. So obviously we know that from the Bhagavatam we know that Maharaj, Swayambhavu Manu, Lord Brahma, they definitely go back to the spiritual world. So the verse points to the uniqueness of Dhruva Loka in relation to the material position of the ancestors of Dhruva, not their eternal position. So when Dhruva had asked, or he wanted this benediction, he did not say that soul that is sitting in my father or grandfather or great-grandfather should never attain the destination that I have. He was specifically talking about Uttanpad or Manu or Lord Brahma. So because they are in the material world, their destination is inferior to the destination that Dhruva is going to, which is why Vishwanath Chakravarti makes this point that he goes in his body, because one might then say that if you're just talking about the spirit soul, then the benediction given to Dhruva does not really matter, because the soul is soul. Now it's no longer Dhruva. It's just it is just the jiva. But Krishna makes this all come true. So he says, Dhruva, you as Dhruva, even though Dhruva was liberated, he was Sarupadi Vinirmukta at the stage, but still he is Dhruva because he has the body of Dhruva. So he says, you Dhruva will get a destination that is higher than the personalities of Brahma or Manu or Uttanpad. Srila Prabhupada explains that in the Bhagavad Gita it is said that Brahma Loka is also eventually destroyed. Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravritana Arjuna says chapter 8. Then in the material world, all the planets are lower than Brahma Loka, so they also get destroyed. When the higher planet getting destroyed, the lower planets are also getting destroyed. But the planet of Dhruva Loka will not be destroyed even when Brahma Loka is destroyed. Now, in chapter 5, you will see that, in canto 5, you will see that actually Dhruva Loka is below Brahma Loka, just in terms of positioning. It is actually below Brahma Loka and it is below Mahar Loka. So the upper planets, the Jan Tapa and Mahar, Jan Tapa and Brahma Loka, they are all above Dhruva Loka. Dhruva Loka is between Swarat Loka and the upper planets. Right, but it's constantly we say that Dhruva Loka is the highest planet because of the exalted position that it has in two ways, that all other planets are revolving around it and that it never gets destroyed. More for the second perspective, that it never gets destroyed. That's why the point is made that Dhruv Loka is the highest planetary system. So in two verses, 25 and 26, Nanda and Sunanda, they give five glorifications of Dhruvaloka. So they say it is Sudurlabham, very difficult to achieve. Then they say that it is the highest because it is circumambulated by all planets and luminaries. Third, it is unique because nobody else has attained it. Not your fathers, forefathers, or anybody else. Fourth, that it is the residence of Lord Vishnu, which makes it the highest. And fifth is that it is worshipable by everyone. So this way, Dhruvaloka, the future residence of Dhruva, is being glorified. Okay, so I'll do two more verses and or I'll do one more verse actually, and then we'll stop for any discussion. Verse 27. Etad vimana pravaram uttam shlokamaulinā upasthapitam ayushman adhirudham tvamarhasi. O immortal one, this unique airplane has been sent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is worshipped by selected prayers and who is the chief of all living entities. You are quite worthy to board such a plane. So once again, we see that Dhruva is being blessed as Ayushman. So Ayushman here means, Prabhupada translates as immortal. Ayushman also means long life. Here Prabhupada translates to immortal because the indication is that Dhruva will ascend to Dhruvaloka in the very same body. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes some very interesting points. So he talks about the residence of Shudaksha Vishnu. So he says that according to astronomical calculation, along with the pole star, there is another star called Shishumar, where Lord Vishnu, who is in charge of the maintenance of this material world, resides. Shishumar or Dhruvaloka can never be reached by anyone but the Vaishnavas, as will be described by the following shlokas. The associates of Lord Vishnu bought this special airplane for Dhruva Maharaj and then informed him that Lord Vishnu had specially sent the airplane. So Prabhupada talks about the fact that, so earlier Prabhupada says that along with the pole star, so pole star is Dhruvaloka, there is another star called Shishumar, where Shodaksha Vishnu resides. And then after that he says Shishumar or Dhruvaloka, which is indicating that they are both the same. So one way to understand this is that just like in a house, there are many rooms. And you can, when you're in a room, you can say that you're in that house. So Dhruvaloka, it points to the region. And Shishumar is the planet of Shodaksha Vishnu. So in the region of Dhruvaloka, there is a planet for Dhruva also, and there is a planet for Lord Vishnu also. That region is the Vaikuntha region, which is why it said can never be reached by anyone but the Vaishnavas. Then Prabhupada also talks about the various kinds of travel. He said that there are 3 processes of traveling in outer space. One of the processes is known to the modern scientists. It is called Kapotavayu. Ka means outer space, Pota means ship. So this is essentially what conventionally we know, that you travel to outer space in an airship. Then he says the second process is called Kapotavayu. So it's just where the hyphenation is. The first is Ka hyphen Pota hyphen Vayu, and the second is Kapot, one word, Vayu. So Kapot means pigeon. One can train pigeons to carry one into outer space. So at some point in time, it is or in some planets, these kinds of pigeons are available that can travel into outer space. So that is the second way of travel. And then the third way is Akash Patan. And Akash Patan is traveling by the subtle body. Or traveling by the force of the subtle body. So what Prabhupada says that just as the mind can fly anywhere, so the Akash Patan airplane can fly at the speed of the mind. Beyond this Akash Patan system is the Vaikuntha, which is completely spiritual. So it talks about 4 processes, and each one of them more potent than the previous one. You can travel by ship, you can travel by pigeon, you can travel by siddhis, or you can travel on the strength of devotional service. Okay, so I'll pause over here and see if you have any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Is there any mention of 2 persons? Which kind of devotees will be eligible to go to Dhruvaloka? And any mention about more about Dhruvaloka, basically? As we did study prior, like Pitraloka, Vaikuntha in the same prior chapters. But any mention of Dhruvaloka anywhere?
So I haven't seen it in a broader context, but in the Falstuti of this pastime that comes towards the end of the chapter, then it is mentioned that people who are doing some things can go to Dhruvaloka. One of them being listening to this Leela with faith. I'm eligible to enter into Dhruvaloka. But outside of that, I haven't seen that there are any specific processes that talk about entry into Dhruvaloka.
So what should be the meditation of what happens without knowing how anyone can want to go there?
Well, at least in this chapter, the meditation is on Dhruv Leela. That one who meditates on the qualities of Dhruva, one who meditates on the benedictions received by Dhruva, one who follows the process recommended by Narad to Dhruva, they get entry into Dhruvaloka. As I mentioned, I'm not aware of people who cultivate that mood specifically.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhayascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. And next week we'll see you and R soon. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.